Tariq Nasheed is a filmmaker, author, and cultural commentator. Many of us first encountered his work through the documentary series Hidden Colors.
Our history, for some reason, it becomes offensive to people. So we have to stop being afraid to tell what our true history is.
Best-selling author Tariq Nasheed is determined to uncover the real truth about untold history.
The film explored Afrocentric interpretations of history, and it featured a range of Pan-African voices.
Africa was not called Africa. It's actually named after the one who actually conquered the Carthaginian, Scipio Africanus. So they usually, the Roman types of system is that the conquering general gets to name the region he conquered.
By the 2010s, the conversation about identity was changing in our community.
People were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on a boat when we know that half of your stock is going to die? You wouldn't do that.
So how many people do you think were brought over from Africa on slave ships? Because that definitely happened.
I don't believe it.
On social media, competing interpretations of Pan-African identity were gaining attention. Some emphasize diaspora connections to Africa, while others argued for a distinct American lineage.
Because we've created American culture. American culture is foundational Black American culture. Everything great culturally about America comes from foundational Black Americans. I'm talking about the food, the clothing, the style, all the music genres, the activism, the 14th Amendment.
The framework describes a political identity rooted specifically in American chattel slavery.
We are the foundation of America. So if you say a person is an African American, an immigrant from Nigeria who comes over here is an African American. Charlize Theron, who was from South Africa, she's an African American. So a lot of people can remix African American. People can remix Negro. People can remix colored. So a lot of these terms that were used to describe us, a lot of people can latch on to it, and that's been a problem.
But the emergence of the FBA label did not just happen in a vacuum. Around the same time, multiple identity frameworks were gaining traction online. One movement focused on lineage-based reparations for the descendants of American slavery. Another conversation would challenge long-standing assumptions about ancestry and identity. One of the more respected voices in this conversation is researcher and commentator Dane Calloway. His videos question whether the historical narrative surrounding so-called African American identity has been fully understood.
And I'm just here to make you think.com.
By the late 2010s, debates about ancestry, lineage, and political identity had been intensifying all over the internet.
I'm just here to lie to you for YouTubeclicks.com. Period. My name is Lame Helligay. I'm an author and a professional plebiscite babbling troll. My dream is to become a legitimate documentary filmmaker, but I can't seem to garner the respect that people like Tariq Nasheed has and put out reputable material. So basically, I steal a bunch of material from Hidden Colors, I remix it with utter nonsense in order to sell my poorly written books that's full of plebiscite babble. Period. Some say I do this because I'm an ugly, light-skinned, troglodyte-looking dude with an inferiority complex. But I say no, that's not true.
The timing is notable. The FBA label emerged during a moment when debates about lineage, ancestry, and identity were rapidly expanding in social media. Now, the question is not whether an idea can evolve, because they always do. The question is, what kind of pressure does it take to force such a drastic evolution? Now it's time for a pressure test. One line of criticism from Pan-African advocates argues that separating so-called African Americans from the larger African diaspora would weaken global unity. One of those voices belongs to Dr. Umar Johnson.
What exactly does that makeup wearing bitch bring to the struggle that we need? I want to know, what are his credentials? What are his skills? What are his assets? Because all I know about is pimping women and pimping Hidden Colors. So what exactly makes him necessary? I need an answer to this.
When you are constant in using the N-word and you are constant in condemning an African simply because they're an immigrant and you're constant, then there's something wrong with your knowledge base, not just your analysis. You have to have a decent knowledge foundation to even make an analysis. Tariq has pulled together a lot of fantastic scholars. Now, how much of that scholarship he has absorbed becomes another question. And he's my friend and my brother.
At the same time, other researchers were challenging long-standing assumptions about so-called Black American origins. These arguments created a separate debate about ancestry, historical record, and identity.
In 1524, over a decade before De Soto pillaged Florida, Italian explorer Gianni da Verrazzano said this:
"The complexion of these people is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick and not very long, tied behind the back of the head like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they are well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we are. They have broad chests, strong arms, and the legs and other parts of the body are well composed. There is nothing else, except that they tend to be broad in the face, and they have big black eyes, and an attentive and open look. They have a sharp cunning, and are agile and swift runners."
Some critics focus less on historical claims and more on tone and leadership within this movement. For them, the concern is whether the confrontational rhetoric will strengthen or divide political organizing.
Tariq Nasheed gaining such a following because he's abusive in his verbiage, he's abusive in his rhetoric, and he's here to divide. And his psychology is that of a pimp. All of his books prior to his Black liberation, Black nationalist, Black power movement, all his books was about being a player and a pickup artist.
The debate also carries policy implications, particularly around lineage-based reparations. Under the FBA framework, eligibility is tied specifically to the descendants of American chattel slavery.
Reparations doesn't do it for me personally, and I'll explain my position, but in hearing your answer, I think you articulated.
Where's your family from?
My family is from South Georgia, you know, the South.
Descendants of slaves? Both of them?
I haven't dived that deep.
Okay.
But my father's African.
Oh, okay. What part of Africa is the family?
Nigeria.
Okay, there we go. So you have to see if you're qualified for reparations. You might not be qualified for it. You see?
Yeah.
Because the people qualified for reparations are the foundation of Black Americans who descended from slaves.
Gotcha.
You dig?
Reparations is not just for us. It's for all African people who have ever lived and who will ever live in this country.
One of the more prominent voices shaping the debate on lineage-based reparations policy is journalist and commentator Yvette Carnell.
Well, for those who don't know, ADOS was around. The person who is a personality, who is a YouTube personality, decided to use the ADOS hashtag. But then they started doing some stuff, and so we said we can't be associated with it. And but that's just what it is. But like I said, they can do whatever they do. What they do is really just not my business. I try to, and to the extent that they fight people who tear us down, y'all go. Like if y'all are fighting people who call us Akata, y'all go. I don't have a problem with that. I've just moved past it. So I don't think it's necessarily my issue. I have just kind of moved past that space. And I think what ADOS has to do in terms of our politics is demonstrate who we are in terms of a serious political movement, in terms of serious people who are doing serious work.
The American Descendants of Slavery, also known as ADOS, has a framework that focuses specifically on reparations eligibility tied to the American descendants of slavery. Sound familiar?
Descendants of slaves or descendants of slavery. Very good term. Now I like that term. I have my differences with Yvette Carnell, but sometimes people do good things. I like that term. American DOS, descendants of slaves, descendants of slavery. All right. I'm here. That's a very good codified term. I like that. And we need to jump on terms like that.
What I don't support is thirsty, opportunistic Negroes who are pushing for reparations externally before we have delivered reparations internally to ourselves.
You've probably seen this petty beef, between Africans and African Americans.
But we don't know how much American State Department or Justice Department is involved in Foundation of Black America. Who's getting paid the money to say what they're saying? So what you're seeing ain't quite what you see, and it's only a piece of what you see. A black face don't mean you're the CIA, all right? A black face don't mean you ain't the FBI, okay?
Professor Small's remarks reflect a broad sense of skepticism that often emerges during moments of political tension. But they also highlight a larger point. In highly charged debates about identity, suspicion and speculation can become part of the conversation itself.
what it looks like, some of that African tour money might be drying up, because a lot of these dudes, he's a Pan-Africanist, and a lot of these cats, they make their little money with those African tours. I think he's going on one in December. They take people over to Africa, so that shit is drying up. That's their little hustle, and that shit is drying up because people are delineating. So, and a lot of ops are in his ear, but the thing is, some people were like, well, yeah, some of the ops got to him, they like to manipulate the elders. My thing is, some of these ops, yeah, they're in your ear for a reason, because they know that you have a friendly ear to them. So I'm not going to put it just on the ops, because these same ops be hollering at a lot of different people. Why are you listening to them? You understand? You listening to them because you might have to share the same ideology with them.
The pressure test evaluates claims, evidence, and outcomes. The sniff test asks something simpler. Does the overall story make sense? Are the arguments consistent? Or does something feel unresolved? Under the standard, each case is evaluated the same way. The claim, the evidence, the response to pressure, and the outcome. Based on the available information and the record presented, this case file reflects a grade of C+. Allow me to offer some clarity. You see, under this standard, each category is evaluated independently. For the claim, I gave him a B+. The argument is clear and easy to understand. It defines a specific identity and a political position. However, some parts of the claim are not fully backed by consistent evidence. Which brings us to the evidence. I gave him a C because much of the argument relies on interpretation rather than primary source verification. And while historical references are present, their application remains debatable. His response to pressure, I gave him a C. He has no issue responding to criticism, but the response itself often shifts from the argument to attacks on character, personality, and sometimes even the physical appearance of the person criticizing him. In some instances, the response contains comedic or satirical segments that appear to be aimed at undermining opposing voices, rather than directly addressing the claims that are being made. While this approach might resonate with some of your supporters, it does not clarify the issues that are under review. As a result, the response is highly visible and highly consistent, but it only partially addresses the substance of the original criticism. The outcome? I gave him a B because the framework has clearly gained traction and it is definitely affecting public discourse. However, long-term implications remain uncertain. So when considered together, this case reflects a final grade of C+. That's what we got for now. Who are we? And who gets to decide who we are? Who Sent You was brought to you by Century 21 Rehabilitation Services Incorporated, California nonprofit 501c3 509A1 for charitable and educational purposes. Fair use.